So, hello, my name is Isabella de Souza. I'm one of the student workers here, and we're going to introduce ourselves. So,
I'm Katie. I'm the graduate assistant.
I'm Renee.
Nice to meet you, Madam Jacob.
Yes.
Nice to meet you. Marianne Mahoney.
I guess my name is Kory Mills. Yeah.
So welcome to Talking Tuesday. Please welcome today's guest, Kory Mills. He was born and raised in Hartford, where he attended magnet school. He then went to CCSU, where he double majored in Latino American Studies and History. He was also on student government for 4 years and the treasurer for 2 years. Kory was the president of Collada and the treasurer of LASO as well. He went to UConn for graduate school, where he received a master's in public administration. While there, he had an internship with the city of Hartford as a budget analyst. He currently a performance manager for the city of Hartford in the chief operating officer's offices. Thank you for joining us today.
No problem. So I guess I start with just like talking about myself and then questions is how this goes. I'm like super new at being like a successful adult. So like it's weird. Like you start getting invited to things, and if you don't do this often enough, you never really know where to start. So like that's like where I am now.
So our goal is for this mostly to be a conversation.
Cool. That sounds much better than me just like.
So
lecturing.
I think it would be if you wanted to share something about, where you grew up, where you went to high school, how you decided to come to Central,
Normal student activities spiel.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. I think it's very amusing that Dr. Mahoney still says, yeah, a lot. If you ever notice that, that's your thing.
I do?
Yes. Yeah.
What's the capital of Israel?
Depends on who you ask. So once upon a time, I took a geography course with Dr. Mahoney, and I got the question wrong. What's the capital of Israel? Because if you ask the U.S., it's Tel Aviv. If you ask them, it's Jerusalem, or vice versa. So I wrote the wrong one, and I got a 98, and my friends mock me to this day.
It was world history, thank you. It was not geography.
So, as I said, my name is Kory Mills. I was born in Hartford in 1992. I think personally that when you start a conversation with yourself, like you sort of have to go back farther than yourself to sort of see how that person came to be. That's sort of how I've had to sort of think about myself. So my mother is Puerto Rican. My grandparents were both born in Puerto Rico, and my grandfather came in the 50s from Puerto Rico to Windsor, Connecticut to grow tobacco. So he was a seasonal migrant farmer, and they were pretty much like slave-like qualities is how he described it. Like they were housed in sort of metal shacks, and they worked 12-hour days. And so, as many of you know, New England summers, not exactly the nicest, pretty damn humid, paid in like company stock, and they would occasionally be given like a weekend where they could bus down to Hartford to see family, but you couldn't really do anything because you're paid in company stock, and then they would pay you at the end some lump sum that you can take back or send to your family. So it was pretty shitty, but.
And not like stock market stock, but like they paid them in tobacco?
Yeah, or like stuff that you could use at the company store.
Okay.
So it wasn't really much. Oh, look, it's an S. So that was my grandfather. My grandmother came to the U.S. or continental U.S. as a nanny for a wealthy Puerto Rican family. So they brought her up here to Chicago, and then she moved to Bridgeport where my grandparents met. My father's side, so my father is half white and half black, so he looks very Puerto Rican. He is not even remotely. So my grandmother is like one of those really old founding families of the U.S. family. Like her last name is Putnam. She's very proud of being related to like the Putnams who hung witches. Like that's her thing in life. Like she was super proud about that, which is wild to me. And my grandfather is black. He was born here in Hartford. He was a musician, and he traveled throughout New England drumming for jazz bands, and that's where he met my very, very, very white grandmother. And they got married, and they had to move down to Hartford because it simply wasn't done, is how she would describe that. So she had to leave Salem, Massachusetts, and she came down to Hartford and raised her very mixed family. And so my parents met somewhere. But so they met, they got married, and they had 2 children, so me and my older sister, who also went to CCSU and did Pilata and all the fun stuff. So I got the very great fortune of being born very, very, very mixed in Hartford, which is fun, except when you are as mixed as I am, you end up with a shit ton of identity problems. I was not quite brown enough for my Puerto Rican side because I don't speak Spanish, because my dad doesn't speak Spanish, so I never learned. I know very well when people are yelling at me in Spanish, so I got that down. Know to duck when my mother throws a shoe, that's a thing. But so I couldn't, talk to my family in Spanish. I can understand my grandparents enough, but I would always respond in English just because when I did respond in Spanish, it was so bad that I got mocked endlessly. So I learned very quickly not to do that. But then I was the wrong type of brown for my dad's side of the family, so I never really fit in anywhere as I was growing up. So I just became like a nerd who read books in the corner of family parties while everybody was dancing. I'd be reading Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or something super nerdy. So that was most of my childhood, so I didn't really belong to either particular group. And my parents moved to Wethersfield from Hartford, as many an immigrant does when you move to Hartford. Your number one goal is moving out of Hartford. It's sort of like the social mobility of moving out of the place your ancestors stopped at and being able to establish yourself in America and that American dream. So they moved to Wethersfield and they realized that, oh my God, Wethersfield is so white. So they looked at the schools and were just like, oh no. We're going to send Kory back to magnet schools in Hartford. So the magnet schools that I went to were roughly representative of the Hartford area. So it was predominantly black and brown, a smattering of Eastern Europeans, and then they busted in the white kids. So the culture shock that I experienced was actually coming to CCSU, where it's like 63% white and then everybody else is sort of black. So that was sort of my real culture shock. So I didn't really think about race or identity a lot as a child, other than I was never really the right color for any group that I was in. So when I was playing, I tried playing baseball. No, just not my thing. So I started playing soccer instead, and my Puerto Rican family was like, why are you playing that sport? That's the wrong sport. And I'm like, I can't catch shit, guys. So I would play soccer with all of the Colombians and Bosnians in Hartford, but then I wouldn't hang out with the Puerto Ricans in Hartford because I couldn't play baseball, couldn't speak Spanish. I didn't do anything that they did. So I was always sort of in the wrong place with the wrong people, as it were. So that was exciting for me. My sister went to private school, so she went to Watkinson because my parents loved her more than me. No, she got a scholarship. No, my sister is very fortunate.
I've met your parents.
They're very good people, aren't they?
They're very
raised
nice
a very
people.
humble child.
Yes, that is true.
She went to private school because my parents loved her more.
Oh, I
No.
would say that.
Don't worry.
No, my sister is
Don't worry.
no, there's no sad part about my story, I promise you. My sister is fortunate. She got scholarships, so she was able to go to Watkinson, and they had smaller classrooms, and she needed more assistance with a lot of, I think she had comprehension problems. So she was in smaller classes where they were able to meet that. She had her own different problems, as in there's 10 people per class, and there was one Latin American, and it was her. So she had a host of other problems, but she was much more willing to embrace her Latin American identity than I was. She could speak Spanish, and I could not. So she was a bit more accepted amongst the family than I was. But then I came to CCSU because
So you went to Capital Prep, right?
No,
High
University High.
University High. Oh,
Why did
okay.
your sister learn Spanish?
She went, so she wanted to, for one. So she is older, and she was sort of the darling to my grandparents. So they spoke Spanish to her, and as being older, she had a better relationship with a lot of my older cousins. And so she was just a bit more receptive to that idea, where I was teased a bit more. So I was like, I want nothing to do with any of you mean people. So I gravitated away from them, but not far enough where I could be anything else. So I was always still not quite Puerto Rican enough for them, but not quite anything else for anybody else in my family. My sister wanted to be more Latin American than I did for various reasons. But once I was applying to colleges, so I really wanted to go to Trinity College in Hartford because my one role model cousin, so she had the exact opposite problem, where she was born in Puerto Rico. She spoke only Spanish growing up, and then she had to learn English here. And she was also a nerd, so she had the opposite problem, where she was hyper Puerto Rican, and I was not. But at the same time, she was a super nerd, and she had glasses, and I had glasses, and no one else did. So I was like, that's my idol. I want to do what she's doing. I got into Trinity College, and then I realized tuition was a thing, and that was when it was like $52,000, which now it's like 74. So I got like a $20,000 scholarship. I would have had to come up with 30,000 of my own, and my parents were like, "Yeah, we can help you, but not that much." And then I saw my sister, who was older. She came here, and she was in Colada, and I saw her like end of the year performance, her dance performance, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! I want to do that." And Trinity's hella expensive, so came to CCSU. And then I learned how to dance in Colada, and that was sort of like an eye-opening moment for me, because it was really like the first time I was amongst other Latin Americans who weren't making fun of me, and it was so nice and refreshing. But also I was fortunate in that like I had Dr. Mahoney's classes, and those are super cool. One's just like good at teaching. But like I met other like-minded students who, for various reasons, didn't really fit in with their own cultural groups, but they still wanted to learn. And so one of my good friends, Tati, she is Colombian, and she would always make fun of the rest of the Puerto Ricans. She's like, "Ah, your music, it's so bad. It sounds the same." And then she would come to Colada with us, and then she'd be like, "Ah, you Puerto Ricans, all you do is spin," and then she'd flip her hair. "You never pay attention to your feet." But it was just interesting to hear all of these different Latin Americans sort of have their own regional rivalries, but at the same time, we would show up in mass events, and then we were all like Latin American. So it was like a super cool moment in my life where I was sort of able to like see myself with other people and see myself as a wider collective. And then, yeah, that's.
We had good friends here.
I did have very good friends here. And then I was able to convince all of my other friends to start taking like Latin American history courses. So I was super
Yeah, for
proud
a
of
while I had like, you know, it was like half the class would be like FOK, right? Friends of Kory.
Yeah.
We'd be like, "What are you doing here?" "Oh, Kory told me."
Yeah. And then, so I got into Colada very early on because my sister was in it. It's really awkward learning how to dance with your older sister in the room. So I'll make that clear. Like, there's nothing comfortable about learning how to do bachata with your older sister like glaring at you. It's not. I don't recommend it. But so I was in Colada with her, and then the student government like slashed their funding one year, and so they were just like, "Well, we need someone to run for student government and give us their money back," and that was me. So like, I ran for student government. I got super involved with like clubs and club funding and everything, and I was able to sort of make my mark that way. And then I became treasurer, and that's sort of how I got involved, just like public service as an idea. So I guess the two things that I've always, as now, the two things that I really love that I like bring with me everywhere is like CCSU and Hartford, because those are really the two places that I think I became like a responsible person. And so I sort of took that with me, but student government really opened my eyes to how I could help other people. And then I got an internship at the state capitol where I interned for House Republican, not Republican, but you don't really get a choice when they're like giving
Well,
you people.
if they say, "Who would you like to intern with?" and you go like, "I don't know, I can work with anyone."
Yeah, I just wanted an
They
internship.
send you with,
Whomever needs one and doesn't have one, and you know, big shocker in Connecticut, which is mostly blue, not many people wanted to work with House Republicans. They're like, "Hey,
especially ones who are known for being.
difficult." Yes, they gave me to a very difficult person because they're like, "Hey, you look chill." Her name was Representative Melissa Jebron. I loved her. She was super direct with me, which I appreciated. She was essentially like, "Hey, I don't care if you disagree with me, just do your work and we'll be fine." So,
That's kind of my approach to class.
I've been there. I'm aware entirely. But so I interned there, and I interned in a history magazine as well, and I was able to realize like, oh yeah, no, government, that's what I want. History, a lot of reading and writing, which is cool until you're like in graduate classes, they're assigning you like big tomes on like revolutions in Latin America, which are cool, but like a bit dry at times. Only so much you can learn about the Nicaraguan like civil war.
Yeah, apparently I teach depressing classes.
I mean, that's a longer topic on Latin American history and how just like
It's not
super
my
happy
fault.
it is. Yeah.
It's not my fault.
But yeah, so I did a couple different internships. I was able to get an internship at UConn, which paid for my tuition. And then I got another internship my second year, which I ended up at the city of Hartford in the budget office. And that's where I've been ever since. So I sort of impressed my boss enough with just like good work ethic. So I guess do your work. And so when there was an open position, they told me to apply for it, and I've been there ever since. And I applied for my new position at the city of Hartford in May as the performance manager for the city. So my job is sort of just to fix things and make things more efficient. So I study metrics and measurements and things that people have been measuring based on the policies they've been doing, and so I recommend changes based on whatever the data is telling. So I'm essentially doing history work in the city of Hartford. So I'm studying trends and recommending changes based on that. And here we are today with you fine folk. The end. That's the spiel.
Yeah, actually, so with all the stuff that you were doing in college, like with all the different activities you were involved in, how did you amend your time to study at classroom?
Oh yeah, that was hard. It was very
Because
hard.
you were working too, Kory,
Yeah, I
right?
had a job in event management as well at the time, and then I did some student activity stuff. No, so I've always been very fortunate that not that things came easy to me in life, but I had really good habits when I got to college. So something that I've always sort of thought about as I was growing up is that I have two parents who both value education, which sort of set me apart from a lot of the peers that I had growing up. So I was able to really learn how to take notes and how to do homework and how to actually have myself on good time management schedules. I personally am a really big fan of routine. So I still have a routine every day. Even when I was here, I would wake up, go to the gym here at 6, I'd go to the student government office, do homework until 8, then I'd have class. I'd do homework on my breaks, and then I would have student government after 3, and then I would do more homework afterwards. So I was always really good at regimenting myself and keeping myself to a tight schedule. Also, it helps when you have friends who are taking the same classes as you, so you can sort of keep each other honest and keep pushing yourselves to do better. So me and my friend Tati would always make each other do our work better because we wanted to beat the other one. And then me and my friend Izzy, she's a bit more scatterbrained, so we would help her stay on task because we wanted her to stay in school. So, it just sort of helps when you have people who are interested in the same thing you are. Also, I was super terrified of my mother growing up, so I just had to be good at school, or I couldn't play soccer. So, I remember once she took all of the books in my room and put them in a box, and then taped the box and left the box in my room. That's what happened. I got a C in class. She's like, "Here we are, Kory. This is what happens because not letting you play soccer isn't doing it. So I'm taking all of your prized possessions, which was just books. I read The Hobbit for 6 months because it was the only book I had. Terrifying mothers, works.
So when you were talking about being Hartford and then going to a magnet school and then moving out of Hartford and all that, so with my family it was kind of the same because when I came from Brazil, they used to live in Hartford. Mm-hmm. And I went to a public school in Hartford, and then when my little brother started attending elementary school, she was like, we're moving out. So they moved to Burlington, mm-hmm. which is very white.
Very white.
So I was placed in a magnet school, ASI, mm-hmm. here in Britain. So for me, my experience, it was different because at the time, the name of the school was medical, professional, something like that. So it was very white as well, even though it was a magnet school. So I was an ER student, English learner. Mm-hmm. And there was no resources, no support, not even a teacher to help me navigate to high school. So it was very different from Hartford because when you're Hartford, everyone speaks Spanish, there's Brazilians, so I sometimes you don't even bother to learn English. Mm-hmm. So it was so different for me going to my crack school. And now here at CCSU, we always talk about that, how we don't see the diversity in our classroom. So
CCSU is super not diverse. It's wild.
It's getting more. It's much more than it was when you were here.
You say so.
No, seriously, but it's a problem.
Yeah, and that's sort of the thing that I guess the faculty has to work on, or faculty senate, making that sort of a push is, luckily for us, is we have them in the room with us, and I imagine they're pushing hard, and I know Dr. Mahoney's been pushing because I was here to get more people, and so you got to start somewhere.
It's called Sisyphus.
There we go.
And also, when you're talking about Colada, it's kind of the LECC here. We all come here and we all talking about things, class, food. We get so excited about talking about our own food and all that. So it's kind of a little group here. Like even though we're student workers, we're co-workers, we also like friends. We
Please
hang out.
don't tell me you're establishing a clique.
What are you talking about? You love cliques.
What?
I'm just saying, the clique that I had, we did very well in your class, and you love us, and you still call me, so I imagine it worked.
Well, you know, you answer the phone.
Such good
And
memories.
no, but so one of the reasons that I think you can probably hear some of why I like to keep in touch with Kory. I keep in touch with a lot of my former students, yeah. But also, one of the things in the history department and in the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, we have as an issue in general are families who think, or students who think, well, I really like history, but I'll never get a job. I don't want to be a teacher, so I'm going to be a business major, even though I hate it. Or I'm going to be whatever, even though I hate it. And I really believe very strongly in the fact that people should major in what attracts them, because pretty much any liberal arts education you can translate into paid work afterward. You just need to think about it and process it and work on it, right? And if you really like history or you really like English or anthropology or whatever, but you hate the idea of teaching or working in a museum, whatever, I think Kory's a really great example of what the research tells us that you're supposed to do if you're a liberal arts major, right? To set yourself up as a career, you know? And believe me, I do think that it's important for me to know, at least in some degree, the person who one of these days is going to be chief of staff to, you know, the Connecticut governor or a president or whatever. I just discovered that one of our history alums, if it's who I think it is chief of staff to the attorney general. Were you in school with Tom Allen?
I don't think so.
I don't remember when he graduated, but we were still in Colorado when he graduated. So he may
I think probably 2 or 3 years
months.
before me, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, plus he's funny.
I do what I can.
He's funny. But, you know, you were a history major, you did what you wanted to do, you have a job, you're being successful, yeah?
Yeah.
And we need to keep in touch with folks like you, so that when we tell students that it is possible to get a job, even if you're a history and Latin American studies major, that we're not lying.
Oh yeah, I definitely used like my history degree more than my master's degree. Like, the only thing I learned in my master's program was Microsoft Excel. Like I can YouTube that. But like understanding how numbers and trends work.
He did not like his master's degree.
Right, so I went to
Well,
UConn.
you wouldn't have this job if you didn't have it.
No, I know. I should probably talk less shit about UConn. But I was on student government here, and I literally saw just like how much money the Board of Regents gave to UConn, the one school, and like they would give the 17 CSUs like disproportionately less. And it was just mind blowing. And then I get to UConn, and all the teachers suck at teaching. Like they're just not good at teaching. They were so bad. And when I spent my entire time having history and anthropology with professors like Dr. Mahoney, who are actually good at teaching and enjoy talking to students, and they stick you in front of a robot who can't talk to people, you don't learn anything. So I'm bitter. Very bitter. But super happy. But also, it does suck that like you went to magnet schools and it was super white. So my apologies.
I mean, it got better afterwards, like, because there was this crack school in Hartford on Two Rivers, I
Yep.
believe. So they kind of merged with us.
Got it.
So we got like,
Got all of that diversity.
Yeah. it was fun. Like, and then we got one teacher, a Yale teacher, that was like taking care of all the
Gotcha.
kids. But yeah.
So one of the things that Connecticut lacks is,
Diversity.
no, well, yes, but a sufficient cohort of bilingual, especially
Yeah.
elementary school teachers. It's really important. There is a law that requires schools to hire them, but there aren't enough people qualified for the jobs.
Like for me, all my EL teachers were Puerto Rican. Nothing against it, but I didn't know Spanish.
Right, it's
I
not
spoke
really helpful for
Portuguese,
someone from Brazil,
so,
right?
Yeah, it's kind of like.
So
now you learn
No,
Spanish too?
yeah, like that was good. Like I'm very thankful because I learned Spanish because my EL teacher was talking Spanish to me. So like when translating the work, it was in Spanish. So I was forced to learn Spanish before I learned English.
I had the opposite problem. The Spanish teacher at my school is from Portugal. So she spoke Brazilian and French more than she would teach Spanish. And so I'm just like, this is not helpful for me at all.
I know Dr. Cardona mentioned that he wants to change the system and bring in the bilingual.
Yeah, like that's something I'm always because I'm still in touch with my high school because I love all my teachers there. They're like very, it's my heart. But like we were talking about the bilingual, they changed the name. It's not EL anymore. It's like multilingual something because I think it was, I don't know. Anyways, but like
well,
one thing that-
emphasizing English as a second language
so.
and emphasizing that someone is multilingual are two different things.
yeah.
Because frequently what happens is that the English replaces the birth language. Whereas if you push to raise people who are multilingual, you raise people who are fully bilingual, right? And in reading and writing. But that requires teaching those languages at the elementary school level, right? Because you know, right? When did you start learning to write in English? Kindergarten, yeah, first grade.
Yeah, like, so the thing about that whole program, I feel like they need to work on that because it's like they give you a teacher and they have to like teach 6, 7 students that are from different countries. Some don't even speak Spanish or
Yeah.
Portuguese. So like they put us in classrooms, so they separate us from the other students. That's
Right.
bad already because then
So
we
you already
kind
feel really good about yourself.
yeah, so like, and then they always separate us, and then they put us in a room, and like we don't actually learn. Like we get everything translated to us,
Right.
and like we just hang out and copy answers and all that, and like it's how do I say this? I want to say it in a nice way.
Just don't.
Say it as it is.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
So, but like, how do I say it? It makes like you feel just better about yourself. And then like when you get to college and like in high school too, it's kind of like you start like,
Your self-esteem's already down. So
Yeah,
how are you
like-
supposed to start with everybody else if you feel bad about yourself?
and it's kind of like, do I really deserve to be here?
Right.
Like I'm in the classroom with all these kids and like I don't feel like I belong there.
Right.
So it's kind of like,
Yeah, I understand.
So just so you know, Connecticut has one of the best bilingual education laws in the country. The problem is, no,
Seventeen
for
years
every,
old.
then
for every, no, there, so the Brazilian consulate and I, before Bolsonaro was elected, were contacted by the State Department of Education for help to increase the number of qualified bilingual Portuguese English instructors in the state of Connecticut because there were only 3 at the time certified teachers in bilingual and Portuguese for over 3,000 students. And the situation was worse in Spanish. That means, so for every 20 students, and the state is trying to bring it down to 6, for every 20 English learning students in a specific language that a school has, they are required to hire, to provide 60 months of education in that language. Yeah, that's 5 years. The problem is there's no cohort. I have loads of students who teach, who want to be social studies teachers, yeah, at the elementary level or the, yeah, and they understand some Spanish or some Portuguese, but they can't write it and they can't really read it. And they're not interested. We could train them to do that, but it's like, no, I don't really like that. We do better when it's this.
Yeah, also, I feel
I'm
like.
trying.
No, and I mean, there is that, so, I mean, one of my concerns, and I've watched it happen, is when kids see their parents or community members embarrassed because they don't speak English well. They internalize this idea of, I don't want to speak Spanish, I don't want to speak French, Thai, Chinese, whatever, I only want to speak English. And so you develop this resistance to doing it, even though you all who grew up in bilingual families have a major advantage over the rest of us.
That's one of the reasons my mother didn't teach me Spanish, like, forcefully.
Yeah.
You know, it was like she was embarrassed watching her parents struggle, and then she gave me the whitest name ever.
Well, I advertised you today as
I
Kory
noticed.
Juan.
I did notice that you left the Brian out of my middle name.
Oh, I forgot about that. Sorry.
You probably should.
But I think that's when also like representation comes into the.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like I'm talking about my Brazilian friends and my community. Like to this day, none of my friends made out of high school. Because they go to high school, like that's when they are put the program and all that, and then like they feel bad about themselves, and they like all the teachers don't expect anything from them, so they don't expect anything from themselves. So most of them end up dropping out, going to work, getting involved with things that they shouldn't. So like even my brother didn't go to he didn't even finish high school. Like out of 20, I'm the only one that
Right.
am here right now. So I had this friend too, like she lives now in the Brick, and she wanted to go to college, but like she didn't do well in school and she didn't know much English, and she was put in the EL program and she felt like an outsider, and like she felt like none of the teachers reached out to her and like care about her, so she ended up dropping out this year. So kind of like I think that's when representation comes to play too. Like you don't see anyone that looks like you, that speak like you. Like in high school, I never had besides my Spanish teacher and my EL teacher that are like Hispanics. Like here, I think this semester I have only one professor that is a foreign. He's where's he from? He's Arab. So I forgot where he's from, but like here, like you don't see people that look like you.
I didn't have my first like Latin American teacher who wasn't teaching Spanish until like my master's program, which is wild.
Yeah, like so, like it kind of like you don't see yourself.
Right.
I think that's the whole idea of
a lot
talking
of
Tuesday
the
too.
students who come here for jobs, right? We get many more applicants who are, business or engineering majors than, history or education. I capture them if I do, or, and I don't, if you're in one of my classes or I hear about you and I have a positive impression, so I want a job.
There should be an incentive so that the students can be geared towards education. If they have another language, maybe more money, I don't know.
I mean, I was
More income.
my teachers in high school, they were so nice, even though none of them could relate to me, but they were like, they always reach out to me because I was facing a lot of trouble outside of school because as an immigrant, you have things to worry about. Like you don't.
That other students don't have to worry
like,
about.
Yeah, like school is kind of like your list of your priorities. So like for my teachers, they were always like emailing, trying to figure out how to help me with clubs and all that. Like that's why I really love them because they kind of pushed me to go to college. Like when I tried to drop out, like the teacher that you guys met, she was the one that like, no, she took away the paper from my hand and she's like, you're not dropping out. We're gonna figure something out. And she even ended up like making me take AP classes, even though I didn't know English. So I took AP language class and it was so hard, but I passed. So it's kind of like, that's okay. Like, yeah. But anyways, so I had like teachers that kind of, pushed me to do better.
Well, yeah, you sort of almost just need one person to believe in you, and that really makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So kind of speaking about like school diversity, how important do you think diversity is for students in schools?
Well, I guess that's sort of a mixed response because, like, I think you sort of need to believe in yourself. Like, it's weird because, like, when you grow up in America, you have that really weird, like, latent, like, that individualism that sort of like steeps in every once in a while. So there's a part of me that's always like, I mean, if you work hard, you can do anything. But that's almost like on you to just like work hard because there's all these other factors that, you know, get into your life. But it's super helpful to have people who look like you, or even if they don't look like you specifically. One of the best things that I talk about a lot, just like having the magnet school system that I went to, is that like the amount of like Eastern Europeans that I met that I wouldn't meet anywhere else, or the amount of people from like Vietnam or Cambodia that I probably wouldn't meet outside of that system. Like, you know, if you grow up in Farmington, you're never meeting any of these people. You have like that one world view. And so just having multiple people from different parts of the world, like you are exposed to just different ways of life every single day. It's amazing. Like even just in soccer. Like I remember like growing up and playing with different, like people from different countries playing soccer and watching them play soccer differently. Like watching all my Peruvian friends who are like sort of small, really nimble, really quick. You really have to push them to get the ball off of them. And then playing with like my big ass Bosnian friends who are massive. So like if you run into them, you have to really run into them or you're on the ground. Just like so watching them like just play soccer differently based on where they're from and what they do, it's just sort of wild. So
On the other, I mean, so we're talking a little bit about trajectory here, yeah. So one of the challenges that Hartford in particular faces, yeah, there are something like 200 different languages spoken in the city of Hartford. And I understand, I mean, your point about, you know, having a bilingual, having a teacher that can speak Portuguese or can speak Spanish, but literally, how is somebody supposed to run a school with students who, for example, speak Bosnian, who are here from the 90s, right? But that community hasn't been here before.
Right.
And those kids, yes, have the right to have a teacher, but how do you find that person? I had a student teaching in Hartford at one point, and she said that every week there were students coming in to the classroom from who spoke different languages. Like half the class, about a third of the class spoke Chinese, a third of the class spoke Spanish or Portuguese, and then a third spoke somewhere else. I think it's a real public policy challenge because students do have the right, you know, to a quality education. It's a basic human right. But how do we do that in such a multilingual community when the nation as a whole is not multilingual? I mean, big countries don't have lots of, you know, if you go to Denmark, you're going to find lots of people who speak 2 or 3 or 4 languages because they're surrounded by, But here in the United States, it's not that common. We have a lot of Bosnian students on campus.
They do need to teach a second language from kindergarten, you know, which I don't believe.
Yeah, but Millie, the point I'm trying to make is you need somebody who's capable of doing the
Multiple
teaching.
language.
No, doing the teaching. How, you know. I mean, it's a real, and I think it contributes to some of the anti-immigrant controversy that's around. I mean, I don't know. But being a teacher in that circumstance is really, really not easy. It's important, but it's not easy.
Yeah, or even just we have one of the other problems we have like at the city of Hartford, just at the city level, is people calling in. We have so many different languages spoken that if you pick up the call and you're trying to get a housing inspector, if that housing inspector doesn't know what language they're walking into, you have a situation where you have Albanian residents and a Puerto Rican housing inspector, and they speak Spanish and English, but they only speak Albanian. And so now who are you talking to, you know? Like, I know the city of New Haven has this thing on their website somewhere, and it's a bunch of different languages, and it's for help, call this person who speaks that language in the city, and they can like help
UConn
translate.
Hospital has the same.
Yeah, so I've been trying to get the city of Hartford to put that on the website. That's my next goal. Because, you know, even just like, as an adult, you feel pretty shitty if you call someone who's supposed to be helping you and they can't help you because they don't speak your language and they can't tell you who speaks your language. So.
I know that the hospital system has translators that you call,
Mhm.
and they do it virtually,
Gotcha.
so it makes it easier. You don't have to have the person
Right.
physically there.
But yes, diversity is important to answer your question.
So what are some of the kinds of issues that what's your typical day like, I guess?
Well, it used to be much easier when I was just a humble budget analyst. I've never been humble. But just as a budget analyst, you know, like I would, my role was to keep the departments that I managed their budgets for just like on track. So at the beginning of every fiscal year, which is July 1st, every department gets a new budget, which is funded by property taxes essentially, and select other revenue. And my job was to make sure that by the end of that year, they hadn't gone over budget. And so a lot of the times, like Public Works is one of my big departments. So, you know, it's a seasonal department. So in the summer, you have floods, you have parks, you have athletic field, you have students swimming. So that was one part. And then in November, you'd have leaf cleaning. And then the spring or the winter, you'd have the snow budget. And then in the fall, or the spring, you'd have the flood season and the rain season. You start that all again. But then there's other problems popping up. So, you know, if, you know, one of the levees breaks, you have to go fix that. Or if someone has complained that one of the splash pads doesn't work, you have to go fix that. Or if City
as
Hall
we were marching down
Right.
up Main Street, there were like
Big holes.
big potholes
there were
everywhere.
potholes, and then what were those? They were gas things or
Oh yeah, the
some-
little like gas manholes that
the
were
little
just like
gas
keep popping
manholes
up.
like this that were open in the middle of the street, and we're like, Kory.
Right, and so that is funny. That is a part of my job eventually, is that I have to like come up with a better policy on how we do potholes. So, maybe. But so that was my previous job as budget analyst, was making sure that all the departments we had stayed on budget. Doesn't sound fun, doesn't sound glamorous, but you know, what is what it is.
It's important. We could use your help.
Yeah. And then, so I started working in the budget department, and so every year we'd have like the budget season. So starting in January, we reach out to all of our departments, and we get them to give us the budget that they want. So every year we start with exactly what you had the year before, plus any contractual obligations. So like if you had a union, that salary has contractual increases, typically they're supposed to. So we start with that, and then they can ask for things that they want based on the mayor's opinion on like how worthy those things are. And then we give that to the city council, they approve it, and then we start again. And so I did that for a couple of years, and I caught the attention of like the chief operating officer and a couple other people in the administration. And they told me to apply for my current job as performance manager. So I am supposed to be taking all the things that I've learned and like using that to create policies that make things more efficient, that help people do their job.
Did you have a strong math background too?
No, I
Do
was
you
a
use
history
math?
major.
Do you use a lot of math at all?
Microsoft Excel does my math for me.
Okay.
I'm
Yes.
very good at
That's a
Microsoft
good
Excel.
program. Yeah.
No, it's funny. I definitely so I got my job through my master's program at UConn, and they gave us a couple public budgeting courses as well. But they were mostly like the history of budgeting, which I was like, cool. I like that as a nerd. How is this gonna help me? It didn't. Trick question. But so like I have a bunch of different formulas that I can use to do the math for me, and but the biggest thing that I would use was just like the trend. So specifically for public works, knowing that it's seasonal, knowing that you have ups and downs, and sort of like pushing that forward year after year, studying how it worked previous years. You know, if it was a high rain season, what did we do? If it was a high snow season, what did we do? One of the other problems we have currently is that Hartford is so old. All the buildings we have are super old as well. So like City Hall was built in 1914, and we have a leaky roof. All of the pipes in the building are original to the 1914, so you can't just like fix them. You have to replace them all. That's $1 million
Are they lead?
budget. No, they're not.
And asbestos, you have to deal with that as well?
I currently don't, but I think other facilities have it, like schools definitely do. But like the flood system that the city of Hartford has, like the Army Corps of Engineers put that in the 1940s, and we can't replace it because we'd have to replace the entire thing, and that would cost billions of dollars. So we have people who are like building parts specifically for this old system, which costs a bunch of money. That's another thing that we sort of have to figure out, is like the cost of fixing the things that we have, because it's presently more feasible to just fix them, even though in long term it'd be a better idea to just replace it all. But who has that much money?
That they want to spend
right,
on
not
this.
almost bankrupt Hartford, you know?
So, what about the highway?
Is the worst thing that's ever happened to Hartford. It split the city into 4 parts.
Did they do that intentionally?
Depends on who you ask.
Politically or
That is the running, well, I don't think they did it on purpose, but that's certainly like what ended up happening is we split off the entire north end from the city, and then we also split all of the Atchison River. So you have people who are growing up in Hartford right now who don't even know there's a river because they've never been to that side of Hartford.
So how did, you said you struggled like with your identity when you were younger. How has that impacted your connection with like your identity and culture today?
Yeah, that took a while. Like it took a lot of self-reflection, you know, and I think I mostly just ended up like being really, really confused as to who I was as a child because I wanted to have friends like anybody does. But when you don't speak Spanish and everybody around you speaks Spanish, you don't really have much to say. But also when they're teasing you for not speaking Spanish, you then just don't want to be around them. So when you grow up, like all of my friends growing up ended up being like super white because they were the only ones who like had things that I was interested in other than the people that I played soccer with. So like I could chill with my soccer friends, but all of them are essentially like running around the streets of Hartford playing street soccer, which is cool, except my super strict mother was like, no, you're not doing that, you know? And so like it really took.
His mother is a very nice person.
Oh, she's amazing.
I've met her.
Yeah, no, she's great. Absolutely crazy, but she's nice. I mean, again, like I am the person I am because of my parents. I had 2 very good parents who valued my education.
Have, right? They're
Yeah,
still
they're still
with us, right?
Yeah, but like I'm an adult now. I'm responsible for me, right? That's how it works. When my parents were raising me in the past tense of this conversation, no, they pushed me to be better, but that also involved like them being super strict. Like they had rules and all that stuff. But I don't think I didn't really have a full sense of who I was until I came to college. And I took a lot of Latin American history courses, and I sort of learned like my people's history, and not just Puerto Rico, just like the struggle for Latin American independence, or just like all of these little things that I never really pictured myself as being a part of. So I was sort of woven into that fabric. Honestly, dance had a lot to do with it. Like learning how to like salsa, merengue, bachata was just a cool way of like introducing myself to my culture in a way that like you're not actively thinking like this is the cultural heritage of all of these people who came to the U.S. and you know put all of these instruments together and boom, now you got salsa. You know, you don't really think about that when you're doing it. But that's sort of what you're doing.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's a fun way of learning history. So yeah, I did that all in college. Found myself a bit. I guess at the point of college, but happens at the same time, I guess. Also, like, I didn't really realize this until like I was in college in the student government, which was also not a very diverse thing. Like all of the minorities would sit together. We called it Minority Row, probably not the best title, but that's what we called ourselves. But so we would have a lot of conversations just about like our lives in like the greater scheme of the world, and we'd have all of our friends who are predominantly white, and we would be like the first people that they're really talking to who aren't also white. So it was sort of, you learn a lot about yourself when you're trying to explain yourself to other people. That was sort of how I found myself, and now I'm unapologetically whatever the heck I am all the time. Like I don't change myself for the mayor of Hartford. You know?
I don't think Luke would require that.
Luke finds it hilarious.
Okay.
I think he does. I don't think people talk to him like a normal person anymore. So when I just insult his outfit, I think he finds it refreshing. Like homeboy will show up to every single event ever in like the same blue slacks, brown shoes, white shirt, sleeves rolled up, And I'm just like, dude, like you could look like you're an actual person who lives in the city. Like wear a t-shirt, don't tuck it in. I saw him at a Hartford athletic event, and I know he had a jersey because my dad works at St. Francis. Like they had a ceremony because they're sponsors. They gave him a jersey, and I was like, I tweeted at him like, Mr. Mayor, I know you're going to this game. You should wear your jersey. I know you have one. So I'm not thinking that he answered or saw, and then he sees me, and I am absolutely drunk at this point because it's soccer. Who's not drinking? You know, that's the point of it. So I'm sitting there, and the mayor sees me, and he walks up to me and my cousins and my dad, and we're all very drunk. And so he looks at me, and I'm like, this is my dad. Dad, this is the mayor of the Right Honorable Luke Broden. He's like, you don't have to say that part, Kory. I'm like, all right, whatever, Luke. But he looks at me, and he's like, Kory, I got your message. I'm wearing my jersey, I'm wearing shorts, I'm very uncomfortable, and then he walked away. It was great. I loved it.
He's got a pretty good sense of humor.
There was
But
a sense of
I have
humor.
never quite realized that, yes, he does wear the same.
Yeah, he looks like a robot every time. I'm like, dude, look comfortable. Like,
I just saw him and he was wearing that
Yeah.
same outfit.
same outfit everywhere he goes. I'm like, dude, you cannot be like the mayor of one of the most diverse cities in all of Hartford, like all of Connecticut, and look this bland all the time.
So what advice do you have for students or professor, and quit with the love fest, okay? I mean, really.
What advice do I have
Yeah,
for students?
yeah.
Do what you want, I guess. Like, really focus on what you want to do. Like, I was very clear that, like, I want to do history. My mom's like, don't you want to be a doctor? I'm like, no, Mildred, I don't want to be a doctor. But I've always been very, very fortunate that I've at least known what I wanted to study. Like, I've always known what I wanted to read. Big dork, but, like, that's what I liked, and I did that, you know? And so I think that has given me the ability to do something that I very much love. And it really kept me like motivated through college. Like I enjoyed all of my history courses. I enjoyed taking all those anthropology courses. And like, I don't know, take some other courses that you think you're gonna like. Like don't take physics or Copernicus is the worst building on campus, so don't spend time there. But like really do what you want and don't be afraid to like dabble in other areas, but you can do that in a way that's productive. You can do it in a way that like you can still graduate on time. That's what your advisors there will remind you. But yeah, just do what you want. Join a club. Like Colado was like super transformational in my life, but also like I was on Lasso. Lasso was super cool. I got to have, you know, a lot of really fun, productive arguments, and that's when arguing is fun. Like when you can argue about things that you care about, that another person cares about, but you're still homies. So at the end of the day, if you disagree, it's fine. And I think there's something very cool about productive arguing. That would be my advice. Join a club. Learn how to dance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And SG, I mean, frankly,
And SG.
you decided that you wanted to become I remember the day that you came in, he was my advisor, so we'd have to do like the courses, and he's like a sophomore or maybe a junior, and I'm like, well, it's time for us to start to talk about what you're gonna do
With your life.
with your life when you finish, right? And he's like, no, I'm gonna work for the city of Hartford and fix all their budget problems. And I'm like,
You've never mentioned that once. What the heck?
You
Cory?
did too.
Yeah.
How else
No,
would
I
I
mean
know?
like before that point, you were like, you never mentioned that once. Where the heck
Exactly.
did this come from?
Where did this come from? I have known you now for 2 years.
Yeah.
You have never mentioned this, not once. This is out of the blue. And I think it was after you got elected
Treasurer.
treasurer.
Yeah. No, I very much enjoyed talking to other clubs and like seeing what they were able to do with that funding that we provided them for the campus, and just like how they were able to make other students' lives better just by putting on events. Like I don't know if they still, but we had the Southeast Asian Club would put on like the Garba every year, and it was so cool to see them like come out in their traditional Indian outfits and do their dance, and like the amount of just like other students would be like, "What's that banging?" and they just like pop in and sit there and watch, or like the end of the year like event that Lasso and Colado used to do, like it was this massive concert, and we bring in a salsa band and we perform, and it was dancing. But you'd have other students who were just like walking through the student center and like just pop in, eat some food, and like watch. So it was super cool to think that like the funding that we could provide to those students would then like, you know, radiate like a blooming onion to other students. So it was very cool. I enjoyed that a lot.
And I think, so, I mean, I don't know what you all think, but, you know, public service gets a bad rap a lot, right? That, oh, those people, they don't do any work, they don't do anything.
Oh, yeah, just paper
Right.
pushers and,
They're just paper pushers, they get in the way, right? But I think what you're trying to tell us, is that having people who care, who do those, and are well-trained,
Yeah.
who do those jobs, and that diversity also comes in a variety of different ways, I think you're saying, not only in terms of race and ethnicity, but in terms of training.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, I think it makes a difference that you were a history major rather than, say, a business major. Not that there's anything wrong with being a business major, but that you bring kind of a different.
oh yeah, no, I definitely, at least as a budget analyst, I brought like a humanity, just numbers that everyone else in my office, they either do statistics or economics or business. And, we get to that point in the budget process where we're just like, well, let's just slash this entire like department's budget. And I'm just like, that's not how things work. You can't just slash budgets. Like we have the ability to look at other parts of this budget and move money around. It might take us a few hours, but we should do that. So that would be my response a lot.
Uh-oh, yeah, sorry, I have class shortly.
Come on.
You guys can keep talking. Are those the flags?
Shh.
Yes.
Okay, y'all need a plan.
You need a plan.
Hi, Kory.
Oh.
One minute.
Hi.
Hi, Nez.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Wait, give me a second. I can't hear it.
She's Nez.
Wait.
She works in the
Who talked? Sorry, Millie, we're students, I need to talk.
I just wanted to say I'm proud of you.
You're not in the boxes.
Hold on, they're
What
trying
do
to
you
get you volume.
Identify
They're,
what they were.
they're not in the boxes, they can't put them up without the boxes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, y'all.
We going back to back.
Hi. Kory, I just wanted to say I'm proud of you
Thanks.
and that it was nice to hear your story from beginning to end. And for y'all who don't know me, I'm Inez, Central alum, all that good stuff. But I met Kory his very first summer at CCSU, and he was a handful. But just to see your growth and your development over the years, I just wanted to let you know I'm proud of you and that you make us proud.
Thanks so much. Yeah, she was there when I was very much not this. Like I had no awareness of myself when she met me. So it's quite the journey.
Yes. Well, I think I'm gonna miss you today, but I just wanted to say hi.
Thank you very much.
Alrighty,
Nice to see you
guys.
too.
Take care.
Thank you.
Well, we
We're supposed to run it for a
up
month,
by
right?
tomorrow, yeah, we want
I remember last year we went for
She's also gonna be part of the
Yeah.
party.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I
We
think
can
she's
keep
in
them
the
up
She's very cool.
through
Yeah, they used to have a summer
November
program for
6th,
Latinos throughout the state, so they bring them in the summer before. We'd do like a lot of classwork to make sure that everyone was at the same level. And then they would like mentor us throughout the year. I don't think they do it anymore, but it was cool.
Just identify.
It was shocking how many of them didn't actually graduate.
So
Sort of depressing now that
I understand you want us to add a box, but I can see
It
what
worked for me.
just identify what each one is. So-
But not all the cards have all.
So we-
I think we're good, because it was supposed to be
Yeah.
45 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Look at that, we were talking for an hour.
It's gonna be easier
I think
if
that's a
we-
success.
Yeah, that's insane.
Can we grab the flyer so you can